lead this. I lead this topic as part of the pillars. So I'm kind of co-chairing Africa Forward with Mawunya. And we've been working on this work in the last 18 months and with amazing team, Abo Nwando, with Brian, Abo and Bram behind the scene to work around this thing. And I love the consistently the monthly engagement now. So just to give a snapshot of Africa Forward. So Africa Forward is like it's got 5 pillars. It's the 5 pillars that has been kind of like created by the social entrepreneurs in Africa since last year, May. It focuses on the shifting the narratives. I mean, telling good stories about Africa. I mean, good stories about social entrepreneurs, good story in terms of what their work of social entrepreneurs that are doing in Africa. So that's kind of a pillar that has been driven by Ndindi to make sure that that storytelling has been kind of captured. Those case studies been also showcased in that regard now. And the second pillar, ecosystem development, where Mawunya and work around that in terms of how can we able to influence the policy around social economy, social entrepreneurs in Africa and work with the big business and the government. And then the third pillar, it's about the funding. And as we know that the funding that comes in social entrepreneur doesn't go to them, it goes to kind of like established ones now. So how can we able to allow as many social entrepreneurs to access to the funding? And then the fourth one, it's about capacity building from the sector on the members to make sure that they able to have understanding and variety of opportunities now. And then the last one, which is like it's more educating, skilling, and job opportunities, and as that one becomes much more important. And that pillar is that's what we hear today. That's the pillar that we're talking about as part of the session today. That's the kind of a pillar that I work on in that space now. So I've been working on this space for the last 18 years in South Africa, focusing on digital skills for young people, finding employment. And I'm so excited from today's speakers now to able to unpack it and then say that this is what the Africa Forward is trying to kind of looking at and doing it. And it's kind of like a way for us today, just like saying that welcome everyone to participate, to engage, to enjoy, to ask questions, and make sure that the speakers are getting much more feedback from everyone. So thanks so much, Danielle, and go ahead.
Thank you. And I think I did a not so good job. Before having you speak, I had to introduce you, right? Luvuyo is one of our Africa chapter leads and very much one of the standing pillars of Catalyst in all initiatives Africa related. So thank you, Luvuyo, again for presenting Africa Forward. And just in short, Africa Forward is an initiative of Catalyst 2030. And through this initiative, African chapters seek to rewrite the African narrative. How do we rewrite it? This is what actually our monthly events are about. And today we are talking about shifting education. And we have, again, 3 wonderful speakers who happen to be female. This was not planned, but it works wonderfully. We have Dr. Chisoba, who is the founder of Unveiling Africa. We have Stimi Nogugu, who is the CEO of Junior Achievement Africa. And we have Dr. Joyce Malombi, who is the founder and director of Collective Rising Leadership Institute. And I do hope, because I'm from Africa, I do hope I did not butcher anybody's name today. Because we all know names have a signification, and I should not be the one butchering them, right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and have Dr. Chisoba begin. And Dr. Chisoba, I believe you have some slides, so you can go ahead after you introduce yourself so we get to know you a little better. You can definitely go ahead and just start.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will just, can everyone see my slides? Can everyone see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, good. I'm just going to put in slideshow mode. Perfect. Yes. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. I have been one of these, long distance fans of Catalyst 2030, seen it all around me, but never had the opportunity to come closer. And so I'm so excited to finally be able to, learn more. I was reading the report this morning and I was so impressed. So thank you very much to the organizers and to everyone that has made today possible. Allow me to, I know there was some questions sent in the agenda. So just permit me to digress a bit from those questions in my presentation while I just make my key points, but I should introduce myself as well. My name is Chizoba Imoka Ubochioma. I am the founder of Unveiling Africa. Unveiling Africa is an organization that has provided a platform for young Africans on the continent to get involved in leadership. More recently, our interest is in being able to put a spotlight on what African-centered leadership ought to be, and really being able to get young people more immersed in their history and their culture. I'm also an education researcher as well. I have a PhD in education policy and leadership from the University of Toronto, and my research interest is around decolonial education reforms, just thinking about what does decolonial education reform constitute on the continent? What are the challenges and opportunities for teachers to begin to engage in this sort of reform? So that's me in a nutshell. I really was pulled by the topic of today, shifting the education narrative on the continent. I think this is a very urgent discussion. Mainstream discussions around education on the continent has historically been about providing access to education for young Africans. And, more recently, it started to move to access to learning. From a third world perspective, I think that's fantastic, but I think I want to argue today that within the African continent, we do need a bit more than discussing about just access to learning. We need a front and centered conversation about decolonizing our education systems. And I know many of us must have encounters about, either being harassed in North America or in Europe about how marvelous your English is and why your English is as marvelous as it is, or not even learning about your history while you've gone to school on the continent. And I want to argue today really that the current outcomes that we have as a continent as it relates to our education system is inconsistent with the kinds of transformation the continent needs. And in this picture that I share here, it's a picture that I think perfectly illustrates the education problem that we have, where young people go through school, but they come out from school being very incapacitated to think critically, to problem solve, to even know who exactly they are. And I'm saying that, one of the reasons this has been because of our colonial past. But now we're in a situation where the white colonizers are not here anymore on the continent. So the question then becomes, why does this outcomes continue? And so I want to share today some of the results of a research that I did. I went across the country, speaking to young Nigerians in different types of schools, over 1,000 young people, from public to private to low-cost private schools. And I was really asking, to what extent is the Nigerian education system, and I also spoke to young people in African Leadership Academy, but I was asking, to what extent is the education system that you're going through preparing you to contribute to decolonial leadership? And decolonial leadership is really inclusive leadership. It's really leadership about being able to transform your environment, to be able to use your career, to be able to provide goods and benefits for the people around you. So I just want to quickly share some of these results to buttress my point that our education narrative on the continent needs to move towards a conversation about decolonization, because we have a unique history of colonization and slave trade. And so here, this first slide is from a young girl that I actually met in South Africa. And here she was telling me about her experience moving from a Eurocentric school to an African-centered school. And I asked her, what's the big difference? And she said, and she gave me this example of where she had to identify African countries on a map. And she struggled. So she said here, I know there's a Mozambique somewhere. And I think I put Kenya in an awkward place where South Africa was supposed to go. It was really bad. I remember having a Malaysia there somehow. So my knowledge about Africa was almost at a zero level. I was embarrassed. And at the same time, I was like, wow, is this how I grew up? So this is one, young people graduating from our schools without having knowledge, any kind of knowledge about the African continent. So this is from another young person that I met in Nigeria. And so here, this young person was essentially saying that what it meant to be successful in school was really about competition. And the school system did a lot to be able to put young people in hierarchies, where to be successful is that you got a lot of A's. But mind you, a lot of the things that young people are being assessed on are not necessarily relevant or reflective of the problems that they're facing in their communities, nor is it reflective of the history or the peculiar heritage issues or heritage connections that they have, but which are also still critical for them to contribute to the development of their communities. Let me go here. So here I asked young people, how did you learn about colonization in school? How was it taught? And here, I'm sorry, you cannot really see this here, but almost 50% of the young people that were surveyed in this work said that they learned colonization was a good event that helped Africa become civilized. Now, I know all of us here are very familiar with the different types of leadership. We're familiar with servant leadership, we're familiar with authoritarian leadership, but I'm sure we're also quite familiar with what colonization entailed for the continent and the consequences that we continue to experience as a result of colonization. So what does it really mean if our young people are learning that colonization, which amounted to theft, which amounted to greed, unfettered greed, which amounted to living post-colonial structures that continues to cause wars, that continues to cause exclusions at different levels? What does it mean if our young people are imbibing this vision of development as an ultimate vision of development? So this means that when they become leaders, they would be looking up to the colonizers? Would they be hoping to continue to reinforce exclusive forms of development or developments that are not people-centered? This is another one. So I also asked young people in Nigeria, what did you learn about the social value of Nigerian ethnic groups? People here that are Nigerians would know that we go through school learning that we have 3 major ethnic groups, but we have at least 250 ethnic groups, in fact, 500 ethnic groups. So what does it mean for a young person that is neither Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, your Ibibio, your Tiv? What does it mean when citizens, young people, go through a system never, ever thinking that people exist or should exist on their own terms if they're not Igbo, Yoruba, or Hausa? I want you to be thinking about, what does this mean for leadership? What does this mean for the young people who would then be in charge of our society? So here, this was a question about the curriculum. And here, this is a young person that went to a bougie private school in Nigeria here. And here he said he had a lot of interest in secondary school. And he thought secondary school was going to help him expand that interest. Then he saw that secondary school was really about forcing them into a steady curriculum, learning histories that are not from here. He said they were doing an African and a British curriculum, but it was more like we're doing a Nigerian curriculum. But that too was not really Nigerian. Though they introduced the study of Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, not everyone is Igbo, not everyone is Hausa, not everyone is Yoruba. So you have to force yourself into one of these 3 groups. So pushing your own language to the side because you want to learn one of the major languages in your country. So this is similar to what I've said, but think about what are the competencies our education system is imbibing in our young people to be able to help us solve the social problems that we have, and be thinking about what kind of narrative, what kind of education discourse do we need to be able to make our education system rid itself of these kinds of exclusive student experiences that I'm sharing. And I'm almost done. Here, I also asked, were you allowed to speak your indigenous language in school? over about 74.5% of the young people here were not allowed to speak their indigenous language in school. In fact, these are some of the punishments that they were faced with: washing toilets, detention, suspension. I mean, everybody here must know the importance of language. Everybody here must also know the double standards that we Africans face when we have to meet the world, even though we've gone through our entire education system speaking English, but all of us still have to write TOEFL. All of us still have to write SAT. But someone coming from Britain that has learned English for the same amount of time that you've learned English is not subjected to that. So you see, there's a real problem here. So why is it so you find that we Africans, we then become at a loss? Many of us don't know how to speak our own language, but we're still not deemed to be good enough in the English that we speak. Our English is still something, or our ability to catch up into the English system is still an avenue for economic exploitation, as I'll put it. So let's think about that. So here I want to, and I will just conclude by, maybe putting out some questions to everybody. So why do we think, why is it that even though there are no white colonizers present with us, why is it that these outcomes that are colonial outcomes that would support a regime or a government regime that is intent on erasing indigenous ways of knowing and upholding a foreign one? Why is it that even though we Africans are in power, why is it that we continue to have systems, structures, learning plans that upholds these sorts of outcomes? And I'm arguing that part of the problem was that at the transition of our education system, nothing really changed. All we had was old wine being poured into a new bottle. And to that effect, the argument would be that we need to focus on decolonizing our education system. And I know, and I guess I would just really say that there's something to be said about us understanding the difference between colonization and coloniality. I'm happy to go into that. And I'm also saying, and I know that there are other people that need to speak, I'm also saying that part of what we need is an African-centered education system. We need a narrative, an education narrative that enables us to unearth, to support the emergence and the widespreading of African-centered education systems. And this is not just an add-on. I'm not saying we need to teach young people history. I'm not saying that we need time for storytelling. I'm not saying that we need a day for young people to, bring their African food. No. I'm saying that African-centered approaches to education is an ecosystem-centered intervention. And the education narrative that we need to have on the continent needs to put front and center the question of our history, its implications for education, and what exactly will be required for us to be able to unearth and enable the emergence of a system of education that is connected to our histories, connected to our environments, responsive to the problems around us, and still equips young people to contribute to the development of the global community into a community that is prosperous for all of us as Black people, that is inclusive and dignifying for Africans. So I'll leave it there, and happy to come back to questions or to delve in further on things that may not be understood. So thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Dr. Chizoba. That is very enlightening, actually. There's a lot of things that I have not been aware of, and I'm a neighbor. I'm from Cameroon, so I should know a lot more things about Nigeria than I know about France. But because France was a colonizer, I know all about the Fifth Republic, all of them, and all the wars. And Napoleon was not very tall. That's what I remember from school. All right, I'm not going to keep talking, but now we have Simin Ogugu, who is going to share more of her knowledge, and I think that's our next speaker of the day. Simin, you want to unmute?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So good morning, everyone, and so delighted to be here. Thank you so much to Catalyst 2030 and all the organizers of this event for having me. I feel honored to be here. I've learned so much just from the first few minutes of the call already about decolonizing education. So I'm the CEO for Junior Achievement Africa, and JA Africa is a nonprofit that works to improve entrepreneurship education as well as employability skills in young people across Africa. We work in 16 countries across Africa. We reach almost 1 million young people in those 16 countries annually. And our goal really is to create a mindset and skill set for future success. And the reason that we believe in the work that we do is knowing that young people in Africa, about 11 million graduates and go into the workforce, either voluntarily or involuntarily every year. And there are only 3 million new jobs created every year. So really for us, the critical thing for young people in Africa is jobs, jobs, jobs. How do they, like these 8 million people that are automatically joining the unemployment statistic every year in Africa, that's not sustainable. That's, calling for crime and all kinds of issues in Africa going forward. So how do we skill these young people to create jobs for themselves, even if they're not able to find employment? Because first of all, the 3 million new jobs being created, as I think it was Luvuyo who said it earlier, they're requiring skills that are not taught in our schools traditionally, digital skills and technology skills and critical thinking, soft skills that are required to even get those 3 million jobs. And then what about the 8 million that are not even able to access jobs at all? So that is where we come in. We really want to get education that results in positive outcomes. It's not just, oh, now I have a degree and I'm going to look for work. It's now I have skills that I can apply to getting an income. And that's really what we focus on. So I was at the World Economic Forum Summit, I think it was May. And they looked at the skills employers around the world are looking for. And if you look at, the top 10 skills, even the top 3, critical thinking, AI, the empathy, flexibility, all those things, they're not taught in our schools in Africa. And so it's really important that we are not only giving them skills that they are able to get jobs in Africa, but that they're able to get jobs anywhere in the world. Because if we're not able to get them the skills to get the jobs, we're going to run into the problems of the migration that we're seeing, where they put their lives at risk to go to continents where they perceive the jobs are. And so what are we doing to make sure that the young people from their living room in Kinshasa, in Accra, and in Lagos can really access jobs anywhere in the world? And so what JA does is not just to give them the skills, but to also give them that opportunity to access the jobs, both at home and abroad. And we have several programs that do this, right from secondary school. We introduced the entrepreneurship program called the Company Program. And what the Company Program does is it equips them with skills to set up and run a business. They actually go into business. They look at the community around them, and they decide what is a problem that I can fix. With innovation, with entrepreneurship, with design thinking, with maybe some IT skills, and they go into business, developing a business plan, and then electing officers amongst themselves, and then going into business to run the program. And what we've seen over the past 40 years that we've been working in Africa is that that program alone equips them not only with the entrepreneurship skills, but the teamwork skills, the ability to resolve conflicts, because secondary school students, everybody has a different idea. So the ability to even come around and say, this is the most impactful business that we can do right now. It forces them to do the research, to really understand what will build their community. And there's a social aspect built into all our programs. So it's not just about making money, but it's about doing business that will build your community. You know, it's an African thing where we take care of we're a communal society, we take care of our community. And so part of what we require is that there's a social aspect to their business. Either the business itself is a social enterprise, or part of the profits are used for having some social impact. And so we're teaching them not just entrepreneurship, but also to be responsible for developing their communities. And one of the things I'm particularly proud of is that alumni of that program have gone on to do marvelous things, not just create unicorns. And we have the Inya Boyages of the world who have created Andela and Flutterwave, and to leaders in social enterprise fields across Africa. So in Nigeria alone, I think 90% of the top non-profit leaders are Junior Achievement alums, and we're very proud of that they've really gone through, whether it's WIMBIZ or LEAP Africa or even in government. We just had one of our alumni become the Minister for ICT in Nigeria. So it's something that we're very proud of, and we really believe that for Africa to be successful, these are the skills that need to be taught in the classroom. It's not about, I loved what Chizoba was saying about colonial education and decolonizing education. We have to recognize that, what is it that will solve our own problems right now in Africa? What will create the innovation that will help us leapfrog some of these things? We are not to sit here and wait for, foundations to come and give us, how to solve malaria, how to solve this or that. We have young people who are very creative, who are very innovative, who can come up with solutions to our own problems. And so it's really that ability to put their thoughts in a structured format where they can access the funding. We find young people who are very, and this is what Chizoba was saying also about, oh, your English is very articulate. You actually have to be articulate to be able to access millions of dollars of funding. But it is sort of like, okay, I know what I need, but I also know what they want. And so I can I can straddle both fields and really just make sure I have the education to be able to speak their language and go to them and get their money and come back and generate money in Africa so that I can help other young people to generate wealth, and it goes further than that. So what we do at Junior Achievement is really help these young people to put structure around the innovation, around their ideas, to teach them the skills to actually be able to design those solutions in a structured way that they can come up with businesses and they can access the funding that will take them to the next level. And I believe if we get thousands of these young, innovative entrepreneurs in Africa, in Nigeria, in all these cities, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, where, we've seen some amazing young people doing amazing things. But even in Francophone Africa, we're beginning to see, because we developed a Francophone strategy a couple of years ago that we've implemented, and we're really saying, what do we need to do to equip, and in some countries, it's not just the hard skills, like how to start a business. It's even the self-esteem, the belief that you can do it. You don't have to look to, somebody from France to come and deliver you. You can actually do it on your own, and you can. And so we see a rising confidence level, rising self-esteem levels, and rising social entrepreneurship skills in young people who want to really not just repair their countries, but also really take on the continent as this is ours, and we can build it. And I think that's the education that we need to do more of across the continent.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. And the two words that I heard from your engagement today is skilled education. Well, actually, three words: skilled education and also opportunity. So skills have to meet opportunities in order to be worth something. And it definitely gave me, I do have a question that I'm not going to ask right now because I want to leave Dr. Joyce Malombe time to speak, but I will add it in the chat, and maybe if you have time, we can talk about it later. So don't forget, I'll have it in the chat. All right. Now we have Dr. Joyce Malombe, who is a founder of Collective Rising Leadership Institute. And one thing, I just love that we only have founders and CEOs today. And again, all female. So it gives me hope. Maybe I will go ahead and have something down the line. Thank you, Dr. Joyce.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I think it is your afternoon. I'm in Washington, D.C., so it is in the morning. And to really join this really very amazing discussion that is going on here, hearing Chizomba and also hearing Simi, I think it kind of set the stage. And I have a PowerPoint, which I may not necessarily follow exactly because I want to incorporate what they say and really look at what we've got and figure out what are we really talking about. And Chizomba ended with talking about putting new wine into old wineskins. No, putting new wine into old wineskins. And so I wanted to start with saying, this is like, where are we right now? And what do we do with what we have got? And I also felt like Simi told us a little bit of where we are, what we have got, and how they are trying to change the narrative where they are. Just to introduce myself, I come from a background of really working in basic education for the last maybe two decades with foundation. So I am, says we are not waiting for foundation. So I had that as well. And we shouldn't be waiting for anybody to begin with. But that is where I have been and played and really tried to understand the dynamics of how do we move this discourse from just saying other people are bringing to ourselves getting on the table and saying, this is where we want to go, taking it back and really figuring out how do we move it from here to there. So for the last 11 years, I have been working with Wellspring Philanthropic Fund. I'm a director for education and international children's education. I work for Elma, I work for Ford, and all these around education, and I came from academia. So I have seen quite a bit about the whole, continuum of where you come from, because I started from higher education, and my discipline was teaching me how to transfer what I know to the highest minds of masters and PhDs in Africa. And so I was very oriented in a very particular way. Then you learn with basic education and you just say like, oh my God, what is going on here? So I'm going to talk a little bit with a small twist on how I was asked to say something about translating community needs to donor speak. And I want to say also translating donor speak to community needs. And so I want to talk a little bit about who are the leaders that are on the table? What is that in your hand, as Serafina said? Who is sitting on those in that stage? And what do we do with what we have got to be able to change the narrative on Africa's education? This is one of the biggest challenges in our lifetime, to change something that has been repeated over and over and over 100 years, and is producing different types. Everybody comes with the way they see it. And so I wanted to say, I don't know whether I should use this, but I'll talk about let me share a little bit about this sorry, this is. I wanted to start by saying that what I'm saying today is being informed by a conscious effort the last 10 years to really get the Africans themselves on the table to talk about their issues and then be able to translate that into the education system that they are talking. So I will be shifting from Donna to them. And I feel that the NGO leaders who are working in this space have the biggest space ever really to be able to shift this narrative, but they are not standing in a vacuum. They are actually, they are part of the history that we are talking about, that they are supporting education systems that are pushing for, changing that person, making them more European, making them more this. I mean, and then you listen to CNN. I mean, we are all influenced by this. There's no vacuum there. And that is where I wanted to say that for us to be able to really get these NGOs play a successful role as translators, the translation has to be multidimensional. They have to understand the education in such a way that what they are passing along is informed by many discourses. Not just the decolonizing is critical, but there are other things that are pushing them. Somebody just now talked about the money. And so translating community needs to donor speak isn't just waking up today and saying, you know what, I really need to get these community needs to the donors and tell them. And then they come with their strategy and say, that is not what we are doing. This is what our strategy, this is our strategy, this is what we are giving money to. And so how do we actually become brokers for communities with donors? And do we even understand those communities, those communities, because we are trying to push a different narrative than what is there. So I just want to say this translation is happening in a system with power imbalances. So we have to understand the person, that junior achievement person, that person we were talking to and interviewing is really operating in a place where the funding mechanism encourage competition and limited resources. So we prioritize what donors want to do and not necessarily what we want to do. And a lot of times we are moved from the responding to that. And so we also believe that, everybody is telling us we should take Grameen Bank, we should do this, we do this. Africa has copied and continues to copy models from other places. What do they themselves think? And how do you get the translators really be able to step on the table and say, I am the one I was waiting for, as they keep saying. So this is not in a vacuum, We are also living in an area whereby most of the translation is happening where traditional models dominate, the individual hero, lost connection to purpose, communities, and I could speak about this for hours, and I know we don't have time because I want to leave time for discussion. But we are saying one thing and we are doing another. If I am the founder, if I am the this, I am the most important person in this whole discourse. And like I remember when I was doing research on slums, I don't live in the slums. Since when did I become an expert on slums? Not really kind of, deconstructing the reality that we are in and really stepping in to be ourselves learning, not to be informing. And so I want to talk about how we have tried to do this. Because there's a lot that can go on about the discourses, and you all know because you are playing in this area. So I think 10 years ago when I started working on this program, it became very clear to me that unless we have people themselves defining what it is that they are doing, learning from what they are doing, figuring this out, we won't be able to get where we want to go. So I wanted to say that we started what was an informal network because they asked for an opportunity to learn together. So the focus was the donor focus improving education outcome. So there's no free something here. And then thinking the people that we worked with for 5 years, over 50 organizations, each one of them doing their own thing, small things that don't really link up. And so they are doing their thing, they are protecting it, they don't want to let their thing go. So we decided to really start what is now what we are calling a member-led network that works to improve the quality and inclusivity of education systems in East Africa. Okay, when we landed there, I was very clear in my own mind. These people are passionate about education. These people are passionate about education. They want to do this. They want to learn. They want to work together. They want to really influence the government. And for me, this is where I think this connects with the rest of the discussion, is found right on the passion, right on wanting to bring change, right on wanting to transform the children's life and work together. But is this all wine that we are trying to push into something else? And so people have their narratives and discourses. And what really became challenging was to find the commonality around issues. The heart, although everybody is doing education, we are all being influenced differently. We are all going different directions. So how do you get people to think about the African child and what the African child needs and must have to be able to operate and in this particular environment? How do you ask people to unite on something that they themselves have never gotten? And so they are leading in their different ways, trying to influence in different ways. I actually believe personally that it is only Africans themselves who are in this space and who are working in this space and who are trying to define this, unless they themselves are transformed. We can talk about colonization and decolonization and all these things, but if they themselves do not see, if they do not see where they stand, I think it becomes a big problem. I cannot go into what really is. It is a membership of a group of 70 NGOs. And the idea is, what we were talking about here is numbers matter. Getting together and talking about this, sharing evidence, learning together, collaborating, and pushing for the children of Africa. This is what matters, and this is what we want to do together. But of course, I didn't know, or I was not very clear about, as much as that is the path. One, we are trying to discover what this education that is relevant is like, quality, but at the same time, we are trying to, can we work together? Because we don't usually work together. And that is where the issue of leadership and working together, which is actually an African thing, pulling together. We would never have buried millions of Africans dead. We would never have actually gotten children, many of us, to school without this collective thing. We would never really have developed, and many schools in Kenya would not be there without Harambee. So it is there, but how do we translate this into pooling Africa's resources together to move forward? That requires a different kind of leadership. And that is where now, just the last 2 months, I'm trying to think, how do we move from rhetoric of collective to collective leadership? Leadership that realizes the complexity of the African, of the African education system. Leadership that is connecting to why are we in this? What do we want to see? What is the change that we want to see? And then realizing that that change begins with me, But that change isn't just for me. How do I connect to my desire for these children to be there? So leadership, collective leadership, Rising Institute is an idea of a different kind of leadership, to connect leaders to their purpose, to connect them to their communities and to each other. I do not think that we can change donor speak or translating or being a broker on education to transform it to the way we do things without really ourselves being transformed. I know I am out of time. I know I'm out of time. I won't be able to talk about one initiative that we have got, which is called Alive. This is the values and skills, where we started to talk about where we started to get people together to ask, what are African values in education? How do we contextualize this? And the resistance at the beginning of different donors and different people saying, you know, why are you not learning from what is happening elsewhere? We got people together to learn together and actually have now created the first context-specific definition of what are these values after talking to 45,000 families and whoever across East Africa. And what I want to end with is, for me, I want to end with the fact that this discourse is not going to be changed by one person. This narrative is not going to be changed by one person or one way of thinking. I think this discourse is going to be changed. You and me understanding why we need to change, why we need to redefine ourselves, why we need to redefine our role, and how we need to support our leaders. The situation is so complex. The situation is so multifaceted. How do we actually support our leaders? They've never led this way. How do we now support our leaders in the different spaces where we stand to be able to say, it is not only the power of numbers, it is what is our voice? What is that African education voice? It has been drowned for 100 years. We are not going to change it in a day, but there are all these different things happening in South Africa, happening in West Africa, and whatever. How do we bring our ideas together and actually support a leadership that is going to be very key in transforming the discourse? We have our work cut out for us. Education is the last colony. We have refused to reform the education system because even after we change the scheme of who is implementing, we maintain the hard way of thinking, and we need to be changed, all of us. We need to be transformed about what we are, but we have to incorporate that because the world has changed. And I am sitting in Washington, D.C. Maybe you are wondering what I'm doing there. I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. I am part of the global discourse, but I do not lose my Africanness, my really finding out what works for Africa because I'm sitting elsewhere. So I want to end by saying, this is so big, this is so important that one person can't do it, but the people that are working in this sector also, we need to put our ideas together. And so I am just wanting to open the house or open the space, as I don't have the answers. I don't know what this collective is going to look like, but it must be African. It must be about the African child. It must campaign and open the door for African children. You cannot transfer this to anybody else. You and me have to find a way. And that way is not by dividing and ruling. It is finding out what Sizomba is doing in Nigeria and figuring out how do we reinforce this, how the other one is doing in a different place. And then leading our leaders with compassion, understanding, and knowledge to really figure out, unless we change the narrative, we are sunk. We will continue roadlining, repeating the same things, and blaming other people. Other people are not changing Africa for you or me. We just have to get on with the business. And like they say here, wake up and smell the coffee. Drink the coffee even if it is bitter. Let us really mean business about what we want. It is very complex and it cannot be done with, we need to think differently. I'm not saying we have found answers, but I believe the people in this call and others, if we really amass our resources, we can shift this narrative and we can be an asset to Africa, not a liability by complaining, and not really putting our hands on the plow to transform education in Africa. We have no choice but transform, or completely the continent will perish. It will perish in your hands. Don't start talking about other people. We need to translate that and get this moving in the right direction. So thank you for allowing me the space to say a few things. Some of them are completely maybe outlandish, but for me, I am not moving the bat to anybody else. I have a responsibility. I have to find the path, and we have to support our African leaders to really work together to the Africa that we need and want, because nobody else is going to bring that message home, you and me. I hope we are up to the task. Thank you again.
And thank you very much, Dr. Malombe. And thank everyone. Yes, Luvio, and everyone is like sharing what we all felt when you were speaking today. Thank you so much for sharing that wisdom. And before we go ahead and have at least one or two questions answered, I wanted to give the opportunity to Dr. Chisoba Nsini to say one last thing before we actually move on to questions. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Oh my goodness. How do you respond to, or how do you follow up on such back-to-back great acts? I think everything, first of all, you guys are amazing for bringing such combination, because I feel like everything we've said all needs to be packed into one system. I think we're talking about the same thing. We do need an education system that is context specific. And I think what we've had so far has always been this universal one size fits all situation. So just listening to Dr. Joyce, it just further reinforces that. And Africans, I think, we're naturally entrepreneurial. So I'm such a big fan of what JA is doing. I'm Igbo, and I know many people know about the Igbo apprenticeship program. So it would just be, my dream would be, how do we infuse all of this to be able to create an education system where our young people are connected to their identities. They are able to also draw from their knowledge of their history, because we have to remember that we live in a world of many races, but our world so far has been run by the knowledge of just one race. So there is so much more knowledge out there. There's so much more brilliance we can bring into entrepreneurship when we tap into our Igbo knowledge system, our, ethnic knowledge systems. And these are all the things our education system has cut us off from. So imagine the power. So I want to, while everyone was speaking, I just want to also just make more clearly what we're talking about here is an education system that I think is transdisciplinary. We're training young people to solve problems immediately. Like with JA, you're not waiting to be an adult to have your company. You're finding a problem and you're building a business. And it should be applied in every other problem we have. We have my road, the road on my street here is very bad. And you see potholes everywhere. And I keep wondering, who exactly will help us fix these roads? And imagine getting young people to learn through the process of fixing the roads. They will get to learn about history in that time. They will learn about civil engineering through that process. They will learn about physics through that process. So it's a transdisciplinary, skills-based, problem-based education system we're looking for that is also intellectually rooted within the communities. So community members should be able to say, this child is educated, because when you talk to the child, you see how the child carries the dreams, the aspirations of that community, and they're able to take it into the classroom. But a child that doesn't know about the community, how can they dream about what you don't know? And so I think this is fantastic. I want to hear questions, and I want to see us move towards the how. Like, how do we actualize all of this? And this is something the Catalyst 2030 report kept talking about, the how. And I think it's time for us now to start as Africans. How do we practicalize a new vision of education that is not about grades, but is about solving problems? It's about building institutions that outlive us. It's about equipping young people to dream beyond now, to create societies that revitalizes itself, simply because it's built on solid foundations. So I'll stop there, and I would love to hear from the audience members. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think Chizoba has done a wonderful job of just rounding up what everyone is doing. We can all go home now. Thank you so much for that wonderful roundup. I think this has been a wonderful discussion, and it just shows the three perspectives that all three of us are coming from, and what a powerful thing it would be if we all put all those perspectives together. So Wando, this is now your job to figure out how to put all these together so that we can develop the education system that we're looking for in Africa. I've already actually started texting with Chizoba and Joyce in connecting them to people who I know are working in the similar fields that they can collaborate with. Because I think Africa collaboration is key for us. It's not for every genius to be working in their own silos, but really how do we come together and put it all together to create that education system that we want, that would, you know, decolonize us as Africans, as Chizoba is fighting for, that will really elevate our regions as Joyce is fighting for, and that will inspire our young people to be entrepreneurial. And I think what Chizoba was the example she gave about fixing roads. I remember a group of students in Ajegunle. I don't know if those of you who live in Lagos, you know Ajegunle. There was a time that it was, you know, all these trucks were parking on the bridges, and there was just crazy congestion, and there were a lot of accidents with young children. And one of our students in an Ajegunle secondary school decided that they were going to do traffic lights. That was going to be their business. They were going to do handheld LED traffic lights, LED traffic lights. And they were really successful. They even got 1 million naira from the Ajegunle local government chairman at the time because of how successful they were. And it's exactly what you talked about, the engineering skills, the, you know, how do you even assemble, because they assembled everything themselves. And it really reduced accidents with children because they gave it to all the traffic wardens that were waving red flags, and they're like, no, have a LED traffic light, and people can really see the red, green, amber, and you know, so it's really, excuse me, developing those young people who see the problem, who have the confidence to come together and develop a solution. And if there's gap in their knowledge, they know how to go look for that knowledge. You know, right there as they are working on the problem. They're not waiting to say, okay, when I graduate university, I'll come back and solve this problem. No, it's in real time. And that's what we need in our education system, that ability to even innovate and think. And I sent to Wando, because I, you know, didn't prepare slides, but I sent to Wando those 10 skills, because as much as we say we want an African-centered education, we also have to know what is relevant in the world so that we remain globally relevant, and we get our young people to be globally relevant. So I did send Wando the slide about the top 10 skills the World Economic Forum has identified as for success in 2027. So analytical thinking, creative thinking, AI and big data, leadership skills, resilience, you know, all those things. So maybe she can share it with the audience afterwards. But I think these are critical skills, these leadership, social influence. You have curiosity, lifelong learning, technology, literacy. You know, AI just came in as number 3 this year because of ChatGPT. And so there are a lot of things that are driving global relevance that we need to be plugged into so that we remain globally relevant. Our kids should know artificial intelligence. They should know AI, because at the end of the day, these are the things that will be used to replace them in jobs, will be used to, you know, so all these things, we need to be able to use them in Africa for Africa. So it's important that we all know these things as well. So thank you very much for having us. I think this has been a great conversation. I personally will reach out to both Madam Joyce and Chizoba to connect them with people that I believe are working in the areas that they are working in. Thank you.
And thank you again. And if I was to even attempt to bridge this conversation once more, I would say from Dr. Chizoba, what I got today was, we need to decolonize our education system. from Dr. Malombe, who is really sort of the bridge between both of you. She's saying we need to figure out what is the African voice. We need to figure out African-centered systems. What are our values? If we want to decolonize our education system, we have to figure out first to where we're going, right? And then from Simi today, what I get is in this global day and age, we should not let African youth be secluded. So find our voice, but also figure out that voice, make that voice global. Don't just keep it like the Chinese used to do before. We close our borders and then we just let you know what happened. No, we have to globalize that African voice and share it to the world. I think and I hope that's almost what everyone got here today. We are at the top of the hour, but if anyone wants to stay, if you're able to take more questions, or maybe we can just share contact information. Yes, Wonder is like, yeah. So if we can share your contact information, but this recording will be available on the YouTube site for Africa Forward. You will all have access to it. You have the link and more information about the speakers. And remember, we have these events every month. Every month, we will be here with Africa Forward discussing different ways to shift the narrative. Stay tuned for next month event. And yeah, if you can stay around, please do. If not, I'll let you know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.